My latest trip to the Swiss Alps was a bit more slow going compared to what happened in Mexico, and the fall season was the perfect time for that. Hiking trails are less crowded, the weather is more stable, and sudden thunderstorms are not to be expected. And all that is topped off with the gentle color change of the season. With other words, it was easy to get motivated and leave the tent with the first sun rays peeking over the horizon. My main goal in Switzerland was to fill up some frames of black and white film and also to bring my Sony camera on its last journey. However, I also brought along a very unconventional camera which I actually used more often than I thought I would. The reason why I took this old-fashioned 3 megapixel Digicam with me, even though I was already equipped with 2 very capable cameras, is simply that it is so small and lightweight that it didn't add a lot of weight to my setup. Despite that, I was also curious about how this digital point-and-shoot camera would perform in the extraordinary scenery of the Swiss Alps. I started to take the first snapshots while hiking, and this is where this camera shines. It is as snappy and easy to use as a smartphone, but at the same time it is much more satisfying to take pictures with. The image quality though is undoubtedly not on the same level as modern cameras. But as you may already know, what really makes a good photograph is the subject and light rather than the image quality. And to prove this right or wrong, I had to make my way up to the glacier and use the best morning light to capture it with the remaining battery. The further I got up the mountain, the thinner and steeper the path became. And at some point I reached the upper wall of what once was the edge of the now shrinking glacier. The glacier had already declined by a substantial amount, but the remaining ice shield creates a breathtaking panorama which appears like an unspoken invitation to take pictures of. The panoramic view on the glacier was also a good opportunity to test the zoom function of the Leica D Lux by taking some close-up images of the glacier. The only drawdown was that the air was a little hazy, which took away some clarity and made the images a bit flat. On the other side, with a 3 megapixel camera you are not losing a lot of details anyway, and I did like the subtle glowing effect the haze applied to the image. While standing at the edge of the cliff, the colorful vegetation caught my interest and I took a few more pictures before switching to my M6 to save the rest of the battery for the sunrise the next morning. Looking at the black and white film images next to the low megapixel JPEGs of the Leica D Lux, it almost feels as if my M6 is a high resolution camera. Well, I'm exaggerating a little, but you get the point. As this being the first time of using a 90mm lens in addition to my casual 35mm lens, the first thing I'm noticing is that the longer focal length opens up a new world of composition, but also increases the amount of film I'm using for one single subject. So no world-changing surprises here, but the upcoming days in Switzerland are going to show if I will keep a telephoto lens in my setup or if I'm going back to just using one single lens. With the day coming to an end, I went to bed early and prepared for an early start to catch the first sunlight in the morning. And with the advancing dawn on the next morning, the Swiss Alps presented their peaks in a spectacular alpine glow. The day brought the perfect conditions to test the D Lux One's low light capability. The rising sun touching the first mountaintop, I took a few shots with different exposure settings because one thing that was in fact challenging while using the camera was to determine the correct exposure. Something that you would not expect from a point and shoot camera in the first place. But the cause for having difficulties with the exposure is the back screen of the camera, which makes the image look drastically over or underexposed with the slightest change of the viewing angle. To my surprise, I noticed that the colors are looking much better when the images were underexposed by half a stop, even though this camera only shoots JPEGs, which are usually not meant to be underexposed. With the rising sun, shadows and contrast were disappearing, and so it was time to head back down. The two batteries for the D Lux One were almost completely drained, but without using the flash, it was enough for an afternoon and morning of photography. From the beginning on, it was quite obvious that this is not a great tool for landscape photography, but because of its lightweight design, it also wasn't a big hassle to just give it a try. The strength of this digicam definitely lies more in spontaneous snapshots, and for the upcoming days in the mountains of southern Switzerland, I would focus more on my trustworthy equipment. I didn't know it at that point, but for what I would be able to see during the next days, a trustworthy camera would absolutely be necessary.